You've done this before.
And I'm also going to
Once in a
stream
while.
us live.
Good. So we can get a recording. My wife is very upset she can't hear it. She's in Key West. Can she hear it in Key West?
She could go onto Radio A1A's media page or my media page at Garage Land or Dr. Lou's place, and it should be, if it's all working right, it should stream. It should be streaming. It's trying to find its way home. But in either case, I'll definitely get I'm making a recording of it right now.
Let me see if I can get her on the phone.
Okay.
You can tell her what to do. She's young, so I don't.
Hello?
Hey, honey.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm here. You're on speakerphone. I'm at Dr. Lou's place, and he's going to tell you how you could actually pick this up, okay?
Okay.
Hold on. Say hi to Dr. Lou.
Hello.
Christina?
Hi. If you want to go onto Facebook, we should be live on our Facebook page. Let's see if it's on my Facebook page yet. So we should be going live there. I did not put us on the radio at this point, the radio, because the radio is mostly music. But we're let's see. Looks like we're live. Just DLOUPICA. So we're streamed live, and then we'll be putting this out on Acast, which will go to the various podcast.
What's your Facebook page?
DLOU space PICA.
PICA.
Yes, DLOU for Dr. Lou Pica. PICA. I'm not really a doctor. These guys are real doctors.
He's a doctor of the radio.
I'm a
The
fraud.
No, you're a personality.
I'm a full fraud.
You're a
You're
fraud.
a personality.
You're a fraudgy man.
I'm a fraudulent personality here.
What time are you going to be on?
We're on now.
Oh, okay.
We're on right
Can
there.
Can I listen? Can I back up and listen to it then?
I believe you will be able to. It'll be posted there. So it'll be.
Okay. Awesome. All right, I'll listen.
Pop the popcorn.
It's flipping around, and Chase is a little bit behind us.
Break out the green beer and popcorn.
Yes, green beer.
Oh, no more of that.
You had enough of that?
I'm drinking.
Bye.
Bye. And thanks, honey.
All right. Thanks,
Turn
honey.
my phone off.
All right. Do you guys want some coffee?
We're
No.
good. We're good.
You're good?
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
good.
I have a cup around here somewhere. Let me go grab it real fast, and then we'll get started. Just for everybody's will, if you're out there listening or watching, and you will be soon. I have Dr. Bruce Boros.
Thank you for allowing me to be
Dr.
here.
Tom Morrison here.
Always good to see
in
you.
the building, just to try and build a just an awareness, more or less. I mean, I have a thing called TruthTrustParty.com, which is just I was going to run for Congress at one point, and I decided to come here instead. That may be in my future going forward if they want to elect maniacs like me, but it's all about the facts and the truth. And really, I'm not politicized on either side of any coin, but I am about telling people what people honestly believe and what they can support with things they've seen firsthand. I don't believe in what I heard.
Right.
So I heard it from this guy or I heard it from that. As soon as that's that whisper down the lane thing,
Yeah.
where it dilutes and then you change it. So
I don't know if you would have made it in Congress.
I probably won't. I figured. I figured.
If you're looking for the truth, I don't think that's a home place for you. Right now in particular.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, whether it ever was, but I hope to change that.
Well,
I mean, maybe not in our lifetime, or maybe not in our, but maybe down the road. That's what we do with Dr. Lou's is we let people start one step at a time.
Absolutely.
One little bit of information, and then take that information and go verify it yourself.
I just want my kids and my grandkids to know the truth, and that people like us tried to get it out there on a regular basis. And ultimately, one of my dear friends of all time told me many years ago, when I was having another battle with the hospital in Key West, there's no defense needed for the truth. You always say the same thing. If you're telling the truth, you don't get off course, you don't deviate, you don't wind up fabricating. You know the story because the story is the truth
Right.
when you tell it.
That's the best way I've heard in years that somebody said that.
Yeah.
And of course, you know my story. Maybe I was I guess from the beginning, I kind of, I have this thing about coincidences. Like it was just too much of a coincidence that all of this happened at this moment in time, and that all of a sudden it happened to create a wave that changed really the course of the country and the world in general. And it seemed like it was like now was the time that it was just too convenient for me. So I was calling, that's why I started Truth Trust Party in the beginning, because I wanted to know the truth, because I didn't believe, and I don't believe anybody really.
Right.
I believe nothing. So you guys, obviously, whether I believed or not, I ended up with something that, and again, we could talk about the PCR test and the fact that, how many iterations makes you always positive, and the guy that started it calling out that you're not supposed to use it for this, and he's dead now, so you can't ask him. But I went through the test and got positive because I didn't know at first.
Right. You presented to our clinic, and you were sick, and you became very, very quickly, much sicker.
It was almost like one day.
Yeah. It was
I went from
2
being
days.
okay and believing. I have a video out there called My COVID Days, and it's an hour video about, and it has all little shots from my experience. And you guys, not personally, but I just I say it right at the beginning. I said ivermectin saved me.
Well, I think it did, absolutely. And I want to start off with a caveat that when we talk about talking truth, it's also acknowledging the fact that we don't know a lot. And there are things being said in media, there's things being said by physicians that come across as if this is factual. This is the only choice, or this is the direction we need to go in. And what Dr. Boros and I have experienced firsthand is that that's not true, that we do have options out there. And some options are better for some people, and other options are better for others. And what we want to do is allow people to have choice and allow people to have knowledge so that they can actively participate in their health care. Very similar to what happened with you. You came back to us, you're saying, I'm worse, I can't breathe. What can I do? And we talked again about the ivermectin. You said, give it to me, let me see what happens. And literally within a week, you were a new man.
Yeah, I agree totally with what Tom has said. I mean, the beauty here is that Tom and I working together, I have the utmost respect for Tom Morrison, and I'm so privileged. I'm really honored to have Tom working at the Advanced Urgent Care up here. Tom's the kind of guy who just doesn't say things without knowing where he's going to back it up. And let's say that, I've been an ivermectin guy since April of last year, and getting my colleagues throughout the county, people that I've worked with, to just even open up their minds enough to say, well, let me research this, let me look at it, has been a very, very tough sell, because the constant messaging, all right, is just, this is the only way to go. The government, the FDA, the CDC, the NIH, this is your only choice. This is the only way to go. The vaccines. And so to get people to move off of a physician who is protected by those organizations and the statements that they put out about don't use it or only use this particular thing in a clinical trial, whatever, we as physicians are constantly living under the fear of litigation. And so if we don't have our mom and dad telling us it's okay and we'll back you up, you got to go out on a limb. And you got to do what's right, and you got to do the bits of research that are out there. And Tom readily welcomed the opportunity to look into this and participate with the program that now, again, initially, we have three urgent cares. Everybody was reluctant. They're going, are you a lunatic? I'm saying, no, I'm reading the world's literature. And slowly, as they started seeing us do the walk, we walk the walk. We talk, but we back it up. We've been walking the walk. Everybody now, whether it's my employees, some got vaccinated. It was freedom of choice. And many of them have been on the ivermectin protocol that is prophylactic. But across the board, all of our people recognized we were helping all the patients that were coming in focused on Monroe County, and together we, and I say, people at urgent care, it's we. Okay, I might have the idea, the vision. I helped with the logo. My son made it, but it's the people that are there, frontliners. That, like when you walk in, they, it was kind of in the infancy still, but you're coming up to them. They were fearful. They're human beings. They have uniformly adopted the fact that this is perhaps the single best way to curtail COVID, and if somebody does get it, minimize their sickness, their length of time, and avoiding a hospitalization. And I'll shut up in a second because I just want to make the one analogy. The whole idea of vaccination, Dr. Lou, okay, if you look at it and you listen to the talking heads, we want the vaccine out there because we want to stop people from getting COVID or from winding up in the hospital. Because once you're in that door sick, you were on the verge, forget it. You're going to wind up, when it was really rampant, on a ventilator, and that was a death sentence, 80% mortality before the utilization of ivermectin. So the point being that the most, I think, salient part of this is relative to the fact that we have over 250 patients that we've treated at all three centers. I'm collating the data, and we should have information. Again, if we can, we'll give it to you. You can announce it, come back. We have not had one person who is hospitalized for more than 1 or 2 days with mild to moderate disease, and nobody's wound up in the ICU, and nobody has wound up passing away who has been treated. So isn't that really the vaccine mantra? Okay, isn't that
But
exactly?
how many people? Out of how many people?
Of 260.
Exactly.
We're actually up to 270, okay, now. And I've also I don't want to be the doctor to the world, but there's been quite a few people that friends have called me, VIP people also who got to me through other relationships who I've helped. I've treated them because they were really sick. And every one of them got better.
The reason why I want to bring up numbers is the constant argument against anything alternative or any options is, well, we don't have any science behind it. And the irony of that is, first of all, medicine is an art. We practice medicine, we don't. And people forget that. And also, in order to obtain the numbers, you have to actually look in the research. And we have countries such as Australia, Argentina, Brazil, who have numbers, but they're being ignored. So to Dr. Boros' credit, he was the first to kind of pick up on, hey, wait, there's something going on here that works other than antiviral agencies and other than vaccines, and then kind of went off running. And it was the same time, as we're talking about April of last year, where hydroxychloroquine was demonized and then was resurged and then demonized again. And now we realize, after a lot of time and other people trying it, other countries trying it, that maybe there's only a very small subset that helps, and yet ivermectin helps a huge population, with only a few exceptions where you can't use it. So I wanted to reemphasize that this is not, you're not an isolated case. We're not talking about anecdotal medicine here. We're talking about something that's reproducible. And I would like to eventually dovetail into post-COVID syndrome, which, lucky you were able to experience that as well.
Yeah, I always said if I'm the poster child, no offense to anybody in the poster child world, for everything.
Yeah.
If it can go wrong, I'll get it. It'll be, it isn't like, maybe you'll have this symptom. No, if it's possible to have it, I'll have the window sticker of all the things you're supposed to have.
I will give you credit, though. You waited because you're like, I'm going to get through this, because that's what you normally do. You're like, I'm going to power through this, and then eventually you came to me.
Yeah. Well, I also kicked myself in a couple of YouTube videos for that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I said, if I had a regret, and when I talk to someone, and I always kind of was like this, before I had you as a physician, I had another doctor. His name was Dr. Mark Kunis. And he was the kind of guy, that was, a friend as well as a doctor. And then he would say, and I would call him up and say, "Hey Doc, I think I'm coming down with something. Can you phone me in a Z-Pack?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, all right." He wasn't supposed to, I guess. He was supposed to come in and get get that little, that little visit, that little payment for the visit or just the evidence. But he knew me well enough, and he could throw me one little run of antibiotics isn't going to kill me anyway.
Right.
So he just give me that, and normally I would just power through that whole thing, and this time I didn't do anything. I tried to use my my baking soda regimen, and I had the what was the other one? There was a couple of immune type of things I was playing around with. I hit vitamin C right away. I hit the vitamin D, and I went through the whole thing trying to get through it. And I thought I had it kind of under control. It kicked me down to the dirt for a week, and then all of a sudden that one day, it was like I had to call you guys because it was overnight. I mean, like the day before, I was fine.
That was the first time, and then later on you had
And
that.
then later on, I had a little kind of a relapse of just kind of like I don't feel good, and it reminded me of the beginning of it. So it was just a reminder, and I said, you know what? Let me take this little. Can you get me some? And obviously you did, and it went away again, and now I've been gone.
Yeah, I think that it's such a great story to hear. Sorry it was you, but you're not alone. I mean, that's a lot of people. And I'll just reflect back on the very first person who people can go to my Facebook. Okay, I had him on as a guest on the podcast that I do Friday nights.
Remind them where to find
You do
on
every
Facebook.
Friday night?
I do a
Still do it?
podcast every Friday night
Oh, nice.
for over almost a year now.
Okay.
At 6:45 under Louis C. Rock live.
Louis C. Rock?
Louis C. Rock. That's his name. He runs the podcast under that.
Oh, okay. All right.
Kind of the pseudo self-proclaimed mayor. Okay, he does a lot of events of promotion, and bottom line is it gave me a format because I didn't have a Dr. Lou down there.
Right.
Okay, so we became friends, and he was very interested in the ivermectin story, and from there he said, "Why don't you come on and do a podcast?" So every Friday night, 6:45, Facebook, Louis C. Rock.
There you go.
So,
Keep that up.
so I plugged that a little bit. Thank
Sure,
you.
why not?
Yeah, but because it's all very contemporary information, I'm constantly updating and taking questions. People writing questions, or
Right.
they tell us about their experience. But as people do go back to, like, I want to say August, what we have is I have Kyle Carter. Kyle has allowed me to use his name. He's been interviewed. There's no HIPAA information. But it was at that time. See, my wife does a lot of research, and God bless her, it's very helpful. And she said, "Hey, I read this little article here about a pill called ivermectin. Have you ever heard of it? This is April."
That's where this happened. Like
That's-
that. I was going to get to that question of the whole thread. Like, where did it come from?
Yeah, because it's pretty fascinating. And when I did a review, which I did that because, well, I'll get to that later. Doesn't matter. I want Tom to talk more than me. But the bottom line was Christina said, "Hey, there's this medicine called ivermectin. They use it for lice, scabies, and for pinworms in children." And there's a little bit of chatter out there, okay, because it was looked at a little bit with SARS-1 and in vitro, meaning in a test tube, it had a 5,000 kill factor to the SARS virus. And that was at Monash University. So that came out with SARS-1 information, and this kind of fell off the tabletop because SARS-1 went away very quickly. It wasn't hanging on. So a lot of research died. So I started to look into it a little bit, and let me tell you exactly the first time I mentioned it, if they go on my Facebook in public, we were very depressed. I mean, we were seeing, the horrors around the United States and the world from COVID. And I was doing some videos. I just started my career as Cecil B. DeMille, doing a self video, wobbly. And, "Hey, Doc, can I hold that camera still?" All the comments about my photography, lack of skills. I walked down. I lived right down the street from the AIDS Memorial in Key West, the White Street Pier, which is now the Ed Knight Pier, where they have the list of names of everybody who passed away from HIV. I don't know if you've ever been there. But,
Probably have.
Yeah, so they're
I know
engraved.
I've walked around there.
They're engraved in granite, and there's a memorial to the people that passed from HIV. So I was narrating, and I said, this is April 14th. If you go to my Facebook, I said, we've been here before, people. I'm filming many of the people that I took care of with AIDS, who died of AIDS, who died cardiovascularly or otherwise because it was just nobody knew what to do. So here we are again in our own worldwide epidemic, whereas we had our personal epidemic that started in 1981 was the first reports about HIV and the population of people, and it was put into a box, and it was only supposed to be here or there, drug users, et cetera, et cetera. So I said, here we are, all these people. We've built off the back of these deaths by trying new things, different things. Let's have hope that our science will be able to get us out of this, that we will be doing research. And I started talking about a couple of the products and treatments. And I said, and in addition, University of Utah is looking at and doing a study on a pill called ivermectin. And it's a pill that we use for our animals, for parasites, river blindness. It was made by Merck in the late 70s. It was invented by some Japanese scientists. It was found in soil on a golf course, believe it or not. It's bacteria in dirt, okay? And now it's been given 4 billion times. It is considered by the WHO one of the most essential medications ever.
Particularly in third worlds.
Third world.
Qualify this, right?
Yeah, where there's a lot of parasites,
Correct.
Okay? But it also treats lice, scabies, and
You mean like
pinworms.
Congress? I'm only kidding you.
Yeah,
Just kidding you, Congress.
So that was the first time I ever mentioned it. But again, I really want to get that point out. We use it in the United States on our children. And we use it at a dose that's almost exactly what we're using now, Tom, for people with COVID. It's almost the same dose. We're using it in adults.
They use it for head lice too?
Head lice, scabies. He's a guy. He's an ER guy, okay? And so if we can use it in our 4-year-old who has worms in his hiney, okay, and you take the dose and you cure him, where is all this fear coming from? Where is all this total lack of attention to a particular agent that we have used for 50 years? It wasn't making sense, Dr. Lou, that it wasn't being discussed, evaluated, or looked at. And so that's the first time that I mentioned it. And then I started, I'll summate to my first patient. That's the first time I mentioned it. It was April 14th. And I was accumulating more evidence. And again, because our medical leadership was not talking about it, was actually against it. They made statements against it. It wasn't talked about at all. It was being suppressed.
Why do you think that was? I mean, obviously we got you mentioned that you need, your mom and dad to cover you in case something goes wrong, and you don't want to be out on a limb, right?
I'm going to let Tom take the reign on that, and then we'll come back because Tom is also of equal-mindedness. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, let me give you a general caveat of what was said. Basically, here's a medication that's been used for over 50 years successfully with very few, if no, side effects. And why not attempt to look into a medicine that's safe, that we've proven safe, and see if it's effective or not effective for COVID? And it goes into your question, well, why was there such a push against it? What's the motivation? And I don't know what the motivation is, other than that there are certain entities within the United States that want to emphasize certain treatment modalities and not others. So reusing old medications has never been a real popular thing. But you brought up the HIV crisis. I think there's a lot to be said for there too, because if we remember historically in the 90s, there was an effective treatment for HIV that was developed and was ignored, if not suppressed.
Which one was that?
That's what we currently are on, the antivirals. It was originally developed in Mexico, and it was being suppressed until they made a movie out of it. I mean, it's well known.
Well,
and then,
yeah, we have to look at that movie because obviously the fellow who's kind of involved in helping us has been kind of I won't name a name. But he was kind of involved in that whole
Again, my point is that
idea, if you will.
My point,
right or wrong.
Right. My point was to look at history. Okay, look at history in general. Look at the history of vaccines in general, and then look at the difference between those vaccines that are incredibly successful, such as smallpox. We were discussing polio, things like that. Other vaccines that really required 20 years of development, like the flu vaccine. And why did it require such a long period of time? And why is that still something that we're actively cautious of, and some years it works better than other years. So what I'm asking your population to look at is the historical language as well as what's currently happening. So going back to why is ivermectin not being talked about, or why are, there's even some studies now for an antidepressant that may be effective for COVID, which is bizarre, but it looks good. I mean, it's not that we should ever say, well, that's an antidepressant. Why are we even considering that? Well, no, let's look and see what does that actually help and how and why. And again, when we look at ivermectin in general, that has very low side effect profile, if not non-existent. And then you have other medications that have a much different side effect profile. So I do want to say something else real quickly, and you kind of brought it up about other medications. One of the other things that we tend to emphasize here in the States or Western medicine is medicine. Take pills, get fixed better. And I want to emphasize that one of the treatments for COVID is watching out for your weight and taking vitamins. Vitamin C, D, and zinc is an integral part of the treatment. And then the argument might be, well, maybe the vitamins are what's getting me better. Well, okay, maybe. So what? Take them.
Well, I can tell you this. I took the vitamins.
Yeah.
And it didn't work.
Well, you were so sick.
You were. I mean, do I have your permission to talk about your?
Sure,
okay,
you
so
can talk about it.
You had bilateral pneumonia, and your saturations were dropping, and we were that close to you being hospitalized. And you and I talked about that. We're going to follow up with this and see how you feel. And 2 days later, you were much better, and we were able to keep you home.
And let me just explain this. Saturation means how much oxygen is getting onto your blood cells. And when you start getting down from 98, 99% saturation of the red blood cells with oxygen, when you're going down to 92 or less, your body becomes in jeopardy of not having enough oxygenation to think right, for the organs to work well, et cetera, et cetera. So it's one of those areas that is a cutoff point for when you need to consider moving to a higher level of therapy. But guess what? There were no therapies. And so at the time that we were doing this, I'm not as passive as Tom, okay? Because I've been really on the train relative to the abuse, the omission, because hydroxy got bashed because of politics.
Right.
Hydroxy is an excellent drug used at the right time, the right place, and the right dose. And all of the initial studies were poorly designed. They didn't include zinc, which is critical to bring the medications into the cell and fight the virus. And of course, you're looking at this whole idea of polarizing based upon when President Trump at that time said, "Hey, I'm taking hydroxy." Well, that gave a tremendous amount of fodder to the other side, and it's been nothing but battles back and forth, whichever side you're on here. But hydroxy does work. Harvey Reich is one of the greatest epidemiologists ever from Yale, and Harvey Reich wrote a 28-page compendium about the utilization of hydroxychloroquine. Even that didn't budge the train, the derail Trump train. And so here's a classic example of politics preventing people from getting well. Many people died because of the fact that politics were being used.
And that's the thing that angers me the most. I have friends, very close friends. There's a guitar on the wall over there from a club that a very dear friend of mine owned. His name was Phil McKinney, and he used to run a blues night every Wednesday. He copied it off of my model, and he was absolutely. I mean, you talk about the stigmatic bar owner, which is what I was. I was a bar owner. I mean, I may become one again. We'll see how that works out. But he was a good person, a person that you spoke to and you knew was a good man, a good person, a good, open to ideas, and he went into the hospital and ended up dying with COVID. And I couldn't help him. And I had already been through it. So I was trying to push, and I got kicked, man. I get kicked, every time, people use like a tone of voice. Oh, what are you going to do? Tell us about ivermectin again? Or what's that thing you call it? What's that thing you use? I mean, like, don't discount something like that. Just, and it's because of this, it's the whole organization that's out there.
Polarization.
Just basically casting something away because it's cool to be on this team versus wearing the other shirt. And it almost reminds me of that stupidity where you're just saying, well, I'm wearing this shirt, so you can't be right.
Right.
I think there was, like, you guys got the
let
polar shirts.
Tom's dying to talk.
Go ahead,
and
talk.
I'm double dying to talk because now you're getting to my wheelhouse of why this has happened.
And I actually want to move away from the wheelhouse because we know there's polarization, and we don't want to be a part of that.
No, I'm not polarized.
Right? No. But I'm saying
believe nothing.
I want us to be able to offer more information about what's out there. We did talk about hydroxychloroquine in my own practice. I realized within 8 months that there's only a small subset that works for. And really, ivermectin can be applied much more broadly and much more successfully. So I wanted to say that. So and the epidemiology supports that.
Tell them how at all phases how we're using it now.
Correct.
I mean, for
right.
broad spectrum.
Right. So you're talking about ivermectin.
Ivermectin.
Yeah. Right. I mean, the ivermectin also we've discovered that really helps, as you discovered, with the acute disease process. It helps with the post-disease process. Like the person who developed COVID really wasn't that bad, but then 3 weeks later just can't seem to catch their breath. Okay, that really helps, and we treat that as if it was an acute presentation. And then we have the post-COVID syndrome, the long haulers, where 3 months later I can't think clearly. I can't put together my sentences, or I'm just exhausted. I'm still want to sleep 20 hours a day. That type of thing. Sound familiar?
Yeah. I think I still got a little of that.
And then we take a different dose, and we've refined that multiple times, and now we have a better response. And lastly,
and let me just say on that, we've refined it because we're swinging from our pants, because we have no guidance in this. There are no real studies. They're finally putting together post-COVID long haulers clinics to try to understand it. But from our reading, the abstracts, things that I saw from around the world, I was saying people were calling. 8 months down the road, I got a great guy. I didn't mean to interrupt, but his name's Sam Dan, 41 years old. Sam was on my podcast telling us, a muscular guy, did tours of duty, owns a bar down in Key West. He said, I can't get out of bed. I can't go to my bar. I'm losing money. I can't exercise. A really muscular Adonis guy. And for 8 months, he was sick and unable to do anything, and his doctor said, hey, you got long hauler syndrome. There's nothing we can do. So my first patient, I got to get back to Kyle, is a friend of his. So this fellow, Sam, wonderful man, we become friends, okay, called me up and said, would you see me? And I said, yeah, but I can tell you we're only going to be able to use some limited data to give us a guideline. I'm using this stuff because it's safer than aspirin. 44 billion doses have been given. The profile is fantastic, and people were starting to experiment with what type of dosaging to give to people that are still sick. 8 months this guy was going down the tubes. He was depressed, literally said, I don't know if I can go on any longer. Everything's going down the drain. I said, come on in. I met him. I checked all his chemistries, x-ray, made sure there was not another illness here. I came up with nothing. I was basically on paper, x-ray, everything. He was perfect. If somebody presented his case, I said, a healthy 41-year-old guy. I said, Sam, we're going to go with this abstract that I read from Spain, I think it was, and they had Portugal. They had like 90 patients, okay, with the symptoms of long haulers. And so I said, here's what their recommendation is. Let's try it. You got nothing to lose. If you had pinworms, I'd give you the same dose. Okay?
Right.
So I swear to you, in 7 days, he was 98% better. He called me at like 6 in the morning. He said, Doc, I can smell the coffee brewing. 8 months, he had no smell. And 7 days after treatment, he said, I'm feeling stronger. I'm feeling better. And and we continued therapy, pulse therapy after the first week. I gave him 7 days of therapy in a little bit of an increasing dose, and then we came back down. And then again, because there is no definite protocol that shows this kind of responsiveness, I said, let's just go based upon how you're feeling and symptoms. So we would literally go in 2 or 3 days spurts. I'd say, we'll take 0.2 today times your kilograms, and we worked through this over the course of about 2 weeks to the point where he had been so deconditioned as an athletic guy. I turned him over to Liz Moran, who's a chiropractor and a big believer in ivermectin, and he was having muscle fasciculations in his back and arms. It was going away. What had happened is he had deteriorated so much his nerve roots were irritated in his spine. And this is an alternative world of medicine. She started giving him therapy, massages, and like in a week later, he was now 100% normal. So I've treated 8 to 10 of these long haulers, but the story's always the same. And what we're seeing now, why are we seeing the spikes? Because you go and you get tested, Lou, and the testing site says, oh, you're positive, the health department's going to call you. Go home. Go home to what? Wait for your lungs to blow up? And then wind up in the hospital, in the ICU, on a ventilator and dying? When we have had something all along that has not been evaluated, and I'll tell you why. It was not evaluated as it should have been while the whole world is using it by our medical leadership, because it would derail the ability to create vaccines. Because in order to bring a new product to market, you have to get an EUA. And you can't get an EUA if you have something else that's working.
Now, this is where Dr.
EUA,
Boros and I
what?
disagree, and this is important because we can disagree.
What's an EUA?
Is an emergency utilization authorization.
Okay. All right.
So how can you go with a big multi-billion dollar industry, okay, with very powerful organizations? How could you allow that to be derailed by saying, oh, this pill that we give to people who have pinworms works great for COVID?
So I'm going to go
Follow
back.
the money trail.
It's too simple.
So I'm going to back up a little
Okay.
bit, and I'm going to remind everybody that we really don't understand everything about COVID. And what we're understanding is, I think you said, by the seat of the pants, and I think that's accurate. So when we talk about why are we doing vaccines or why are we doing other treatments, I'm going to go back and say I've seen people who respond to other treatments other than ivermectin. They're a minority, but there are some who don't respond to ivermectin who respond to antiviral. That's wonderful. Let them have the choice. When we talk about vaccines, I think vaccines are going to play a role. We talked about this at breakfast, but we need to hear more evidence about what happens long term. Like
That's
we
what
don't
scares me.
right. We don't understand. We understand the production of antibodies. We understand that the way that we're charging up the immune system so it can respond to a certain type of coronavirus. But coronavirus, by definition, which has been with us since the beginning of humanity, which is the common cold, one of its traits is how it mutates, or the word is variants. I think they're using variants in the public.
Yeah.
But how it mutates twice a month, 3 times a month. I mean, the reason why we develop resistance to colds after we move from one city to another, common cold I'm talking about, is because we develop a humoral T-cell memory, and when we get that virus, our body handles it, get out of here, and it's done, right? Unless you're immunosuppressed. COVID-19 is unique because of its transmission, because of how long people carry it. And this is the other thing I wanted to dovetail into. One of the other things I've noticed, we have not studied this, so I have no evidence other than anecdotal. This is anecdotal, okay?
Right.
Is that patients I have put on ivermectin who go back to get swabbed for their PCR are much more rapidly negative. up to even a week or 2 weeks. Where other people who do not take the ivermectin, who do other choices, whether it be hydroxychloroquine or Lamivudine, which is an excellent monoclonal antibody, or whatever they choose, they're hospitalized to get Remdesivir, they will have a positive PCR for months. So that's hard to ignore, and that also is part of the bigger picture. But I did want, does that make sense what I said?
It does, and I think that Tom should be canceled. He needs to be canceled.
He needs to be canceled for what he said. Ready to put
Now,
him,
this is the beauty of
put him to sleep.
You know, what we're doing here, with you not being a moderator, this is a heavyweight fight, although we committed to lose it. The bottom line is here we're having dialogue.
Yeah.
We're having communication. And Tom has done his reading, and he has built his basis of comment around the things that he has seen, the things we talked about, and I also yield to listen to Tom's research and the things that he has done, and I respect that. You know, it's a pathway. It's his guide that's moving him forward in the way he's thinking, and I respect it. Do I have my own? Yes, of course I have my own. I think that I'm very worried about the vaccines because I think that this virus is really smart and it's outpacing us. And I think that the utilization, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I just think that if we were going to kill this virus, we should have been ready to vaccinate everybody. Because the longer you let a virus hang around, notoriously, they mutate.
And there's validity in what you're saying, Bruce. There absolutely is. And that's why we're going to watch and see. And I hope for the best, not the worst.
Yeah.
I worry about it because, again, I'm a person who pays attention to a lot of different news sources. I pretty much don't believe the mainstream as much now. I really have a hard time because they're so polarized on either side. I kind of try and look for anybody in the middle that's kind of crossing the line of just being objective and framing what they say with, look, I'm not going to get on either side of the coin. I've never found much use in either side. I've found use in looking back into history and I look at human nature, and I say, well, where's the upside? Who's winning? If we're going to have a war, who's winning? Who won? Who got paid, if you will? and that's kind of where my point of view comes from. So the patterns tend to, I'm a big pattern guy, so I focus on the patterns. So in this case,
let me just ask you. Excuse me for interrupting. Okay,
go ahead.
You interviewed tons of people. You're out there. You're an intelligent man. You suffered
Thank you.
COVID. You suffered COVID. You've lived it. And so let me ask you, why was I blocked by Facebook for 1 month? It's my 7th block, and it's always related to talking about alternative therapy, particularly like ivermectin. I've never bashed vaccines. I was blocked for 1 month recently because I don't meet the community standards for Facebook. What are those? Who's evaluating me? Am I being judged by a group of my peers, like if I had committed malpractice or something? Who is suppressing the medical information? You said, you judge both sides.
Sure.
But tell me, what have you heard about ivermectin in the national news, in the mainstream, the people that have total control of almost all the words that are coming out? What have you heard about ivermectin?
Well, what I heard about it is there was and it was funny because there was an interview. It was going on. It was in Congress, and I'm sure you know about this.
I very well.
There was a feather, it started with I didn't even hear ivermectin initially.
That was December 12th.
Yeah, and they started going through it, and there was this thing, and there was it was C-SPAN was covering it. And they went and said, okay, well, there's this doctor. It's coming up on the screen. So they put him up on the screen, and he's testifying to Congress. And he's saying that, and he was, of course, saying, I think this thing's the miracle.
Dr.
Pierre Corey.
Yeah, Dr. Corey. Yeah.
Well, that thing got blocked.
So, I throw it back to you.
And that's on C-SPAN.
Where is the fairness?
Well, there's no fairness.
There is no fairness. So how can people make a legitimate decision when there is essentially no fairness. No words are are coming out. I get a block for a month. Many people. I don't even use the word ivermectin at all on Facebook. I don't even want to tell you my name for it because if I put it up one more time, I'll probably be totally canceled out. But the fact is here, there is I believe, and I've never been a conspiracy person in my life. My wife hates me for that because she believes there's a lot of things. But the fact is, if ever there was a cover-up, if ever there was I would say omission, and that would be very gentle. It's a commission of what I feel is big pharma, tech, everywhere where money could be made in billions of dollars, they're controlling the narrative. And groups like the FLCCC, Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Committee, and I'm big push for them. I honor what they're doing. It's around the world a group of doctors, not for profit, who are getting out the message about ivermectin. They've published over 2,000 papers, this entire group. Please donate to them, by the way.
So it's the
FLCCC.net.
FLCCC.net.
Okay, now, please go on there because
I have donated, by the way.
They are.
I'm broke, but
I know.
Yeah, I'm asking everybody because they're putting out incredible information. They have established protocols based upon contemporary intercommunications around the world with doctors that are trying to stop COVID. And they've had a very rugged time because Ron Johnson was the representative who's saying, why haven't we heard about this? I'm demanding an immediate evaluation, blah, 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 blah. He presented in front of the NIH. Dr. Andrew Hill has presented irrefutable evidence about ivermectin to the World Health Organization, and everybody just sits there and kicks the can down the road because who is going to go up against Big Pharma and tech? Okay, you're talking about turning over a $150 billion apple cart with a $5 pill. With a $5 pill.
Yeah, and again, like these vaccines, everybody's getting them for free, but they're not free. Somebody's charging for them, and what's a vial of that stuff cost? A couple $100, probably at least.
I want to take
a shot. They're getting like a couple hundred a shot for them.
I want to take a step back and something you talked about, news and acquiring ideas. What I want to encourage your population, the people who are listening to you now, and it's taking it from a psychologist who I have a lot of confidence in. We need to start listening. You need to start being a person with ideas and not listening to ideas that have people. What we're hearing here is not just narratives, it's ideology. It's becoming almost religious and tribal. And when you listen to somebody, you think of, am I hearing an idea that's new, that's novel? Or am I hearing an ideology that's being reproduced over and over again? So look for the people who have ideas, who have actually looked at controversial things and understand, the spectrum of what's being presented, and avoid people who are nothing but representing ideas, who are, ideas that have people. Does that make sense?
Good advice.
And that goes back to what we said. At urgent care, we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. We are treating people. We're frontline people. We're seeing the responses of Dr. Lou and hundreds of other people by utilizing this particular medication that works. And I'll take it back to Kyle Carter, my first guy, 6'5", 300 pounds. I had never treated a patient with ivermectin. I knew all about it. I read from her, and this guy comes in, and he's got 60% of his lungs are filled with COVID.
I remember that case.
He's on. If they go to my Facebook, they'll go back to
like. Did he go on a ventilator?
He was breathing 32 times a minute, spiking fevers to 102.7. He had been put on steroids at the wrong time by an organization, and he came and he said, "I'm going to die. Now, I'm going to die.
Here's a caveat. I too was putting people on steroids too early, until about May when we realized what we were doing.
Yeah.
This is a spectrum of understanding a disease. What I was doing in end of March and April is far different than what I'm doing now. And that's a learning curve.
Yeah,
But
it's
go
the
on.
evolutionary process.
So the fact that he
his-
received steroids early, now we recognize was incorrect. But at that time,
because we were suppressing his immune system at a time his immune system was trying to beat up COVID.
hang on.
And so here we made an incorrect judgment based upon the information at that time.
correct.
Okay, so when Kyle came and we did the CT at urgent care, I said, I don't know what to do. You're going to be on a ventilator in 12 hours. I don't want to go to.
That's the way I was when there's a
was.
video of me driving to the thing, and I'm going, and I pulled in that parking lot. I looked at that, I'm a visual person. I looked at it, I said, I don't think I'm getting out of here.
Yeah,
I really
I'll tell
believe
you
I'm
who
going
else
to
said that.
I'm going to
Yeah.
walk in this hospital, and I'm not coming out.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I'm not going to be able to drive my truck anymore. It was like the simplest things, and credit to the Mariners, they were very good to me. But I did tell the guy when he walked in the room, I said, if you bring a ventilator anywhere near me, I'm going to beat up your machine.
Well,
You'll never use it on another person. So they laughed at me and they said, no, we don't do that here anymore. We use heavy steroids, and we got other ways around it.
We got
I
other
said,
ways to watch
I'm
you
just
die.
telling you right now, you're not getting my consent. No matter what. If I'm laying dead on the street, I'm telling you right now, I say right now, no consent for a ventilator for me ever.
Yeah. So when you look at the process, again, evolutionarily, Tom in the ER has got these people crashing through the door because there was no treatment. Because the only treatment that was out there was not being looked at. It was not being evaluated. And so therefore, I have always said, when something doesn't make logical sense, there's an ulterior motive behind it. And the ulterior motive here was increased hospital reimbursements, perhaps, okay, and the fact that that the whole idea of vaccine was now being espoused. This is the only way out of the problem. There is nothing else that works. And even the situation with Fauci, who's the head of the NIAIA. Okay,
I was trying to avoid his name.
Listen, like a tenth of my town turned against me. I did a late night video, and I said, I think Dr. Fauci's a fraud. Now, I'm not the only one. That was in April. I'm not the only one who's saying it, so at least I'm have company, whether I'm right or wrong, okay? There's a lot of people that are saying it, okay? So the bottom line is you look at the remdesivir. Okay, he was paid by Gilead to monitor that study and come out with the conclusions. What were the endpoints? And on remdesivir, the endpoints were changed 72 hours before it came out with a statement by the guy who's being paid, his organization, to evaluate it. Well, it looks like it'll cut down 3 days on being in the ICU. And that was the endpoint that then launched the billion-dollar industry of remdesivir, which the WHO says don't use remdesivir. And people are still using and giving remdesivir. Why? Because they don't realize that there are other things that could help, because we can't talk about that other thing that helps that starts with the letter I.
So now where we are with the treatment of COVID is
frustration.
We
Oh
have
my God.
we have a lot of options, and not all of them are absolute. So we're certainly using the word ivermectin a great deal of time. We mentioned briefly hydroxychloroquine, which is a very small subset of people that helps, but it still helps. There's a monoclonal antibody I mentioned once. I'll mention it again, and I have seen people get better with it, and it's called Banlamvadide. I think I'm saying it properly.
But it has to be used at a certain group of people.
It has to be within. It has to be within
hydroxy.
It has to be within 10 days
Right.
of presentation, and you pretty much have to be over 55 to get it.
And you have
there's
to
some
be
other
pretty sick.
criteria.
Moderately ill.
Not
Mild
too
to
sick.
moderately ill.
But you can't be too sick.
Yeah, you can't be too sick.
Yeah,
Can't
yeah.
use it.
Anyway.
Okay.
How do you judge too sick versus
Well,
not
there's
too,
criteria.
not so too sick?
There's criteria. There's criteria. And then the remdesivir you mentioned, you're right. I've seen half the times it was used, it didn't help at all, and I've seen people where it really has helped. And I think it goes back to saying we don't understand this disease as well as we want to, and I think maybe in 2 years we will. But with that said, to eliminate options is foolish, and to say that there are no options. Plasma's gone out of favor, okay? I've personally seen 5 people get better with plasma. overall, does it work? No, obviously not. That's why they're not using it as much anymore. But except for in very extreme cases, you know what I mean by plasma. They would take antibodies from people
Yeah.
and then reconstitute
Because
them.
people were thinking of selling their blood after they had it.
No, these
Oh,
were-
yeah, you want to get my blood?
These were people that were raising their hand to say, please take
Yes,
my
they were.
plasma. I want to save a
To their
life.
credit.
Mine was saved. I want to save a life.
Overall,
Well, if it works, I mean, they take mine too.
but unfortunately, when you look at big studies, it doesn't seem to help. You know, when you look at big studies of ivermectin, it does seem to help. When you look at big studies of BAM, it may help. We don't know yet. I mean, it's very interesting, and
It seems like BAM would be more expensive than
it's much more expensive, absolutely.
than ivermectin, because ivermectin is
But let me tell you,
There's no,
what's
there's
like
no,
a-
com-
it's
there's
a
no
bargain.
comparison. There's no comparison.
See, a real interesting thing that I'd love to know, and I don't know where to go. Maybe somebody can send it to me, Tom. Maybe you know what the hospitals are using. If you use BAM at 700 milligrams, at 1,800 milligrams, or 2,800 milligrams, the outcomes are the same.
They use
They're-
it at 700.
Yeah. Okay. So how many hospitals are using the 700, which costs $1,200 to $1,300, or are saying, hey, let's use double the dose or triple the dose? You know, these are all questions now that the motivational factors are the I guess the one-offs in the industry of what's driving decision making, and so therefore, my feeling is, if you have something, if you go back to the Helsinki World Health Organization Accord in 1964, they said, and I've quoted this many times, it's there, it's in the compendium by the FLCCC. If you don't have any agent that's working, and you've got a pandemic or a crisis, a lot of people are dying, and you got nothing that is working, and at that time a year ago, we had nothing that was working, really working. Would you agree, Tom? Yeah? April, May, June. So the Helsinki Accord in 64 said, if you got nothing else and you have a drug that shows great promise in number of evaluations, observational or randomized control, so it's got great efficacy, great promise, low cost, and does no harm, use it immediately in human beings. Forget a double-blind controlled study. Forget giving it to an animal. As a trial, and Moderna and Pfizer have no animal trials. It's unheralded.
that violates the Nuremberg.
Well, it is Nuremberg.
Goes back to
you know,
Nuremberg. I mean, you're
So-
not supposed to do that stuff. You're not supposed to test
Well,
stuff
but there
on
was
humans.
but it was
we're
emergency.
desperate.
Unless you're desperate.
Yeah,
we're,
and we
we're
were
desperate.
desperate.
We
We
were
were.
desperate
Yeah.
because our leadership.
You guys were, but Moderna wasn't. I don't think. Right?
well, let's
they
just
had
say
ivermectin.
they
They had Helsinki to go back to. Right?
So, but think about that, 1964. If you don't have anything that's working, try something. And then already 4 billion doses of this pill had been given for a variety of other diseases or illnesses in human beings with minimal deaths. I mean, the last time Tom was saying, where'd you get that number of 16 deaths from ivermectin? Somewhere in my thousands of articles that I've been reading, I looked up what is a death from ivermectin. How many people have died because they took ivermectin? And it was 16. I can't remember where I read it, in 40 years. And even if it's 32 or 48, people have died in 40 years from an innocuous agent.
How many people have died from chicken?
Oh my God! How many people have died?
3 every afternoon around here.
Go back to the doctors in Great Britain, the cardiologists and internists that were taking a baby aspirin one a day, and look at the amount of brain hemorrhage that happened from a baby aspirin trial in medical people. So this whole thing is become almost, to me, preposterous, and therefore, thank God, the people that I am affiliated with, they have read, are getting the messaging. And let me tell you why this is important, along what Tom just said. You are responsible for your health. You need to get educated about your health, what options are out there, and it is on many sites. I would recommend using DuckDuckGo, okay, because it's unfiltered, all right? It's not being controlled. As far as my research, you'd use it too. So let me just go to 2 things. One is I want to go back to Kyle Carter. Tom, if I'm talking too much,
You're
you
good.
just nudge
You're
me.
good.
Now, let me ask you a question before,
No.
we go into this.
Okay, go ahead.
Now,
It's your show.
Do you guys have a hard stop at 1 hour? Or you guys have?
Unfortunately, we do.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So we're
I have about 10 minutes beyond that. Do you have 10 minutes?
Yeah, I have 10
Okay,
minutes.
So we'll give.
okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to.
I was referring to your appointment. I know
Oh
you
yeah,
have,
at
you have an
11.
appointment.
I
at
have
11.
one at
Right,
11.
right.
So
I'm just going.